Welcome back. We're gonna try shooting this with the camera where it is. Unfortunately, where it needs to be is a wall. So this is as good as it's gonna get. I mentioned before how there's two main ways to approach weaving a project. You can start with the end requirements and backtrack to how much raw material you need, or you can start with the raw material and determine how much that gets you of woven fabric. In this case, we started with one cake of Sultan's Shadow, 100% cotton, 200 grams, which is 800 meters or 874 yards from Hobby. It is a 4-stranded cotton. There's 4 little teeny tiny threads here. And slowly 1 strand at a time shifts, so you get a gradient over the course of the 874 meter cake. Now, this is a 20-inch Ashford Knitter's loom with a 10-dent heddle. Sometimes I call it the reed because I learned weaving terms on looms like that. But that means there are 200 ends, and 874 divided by 200 left me with needing a 157 point something inch warp. I wound what was, as best as I could easily measure, 158 inches, maybe and a fraction. And if I used the very last spot, as in on the side of the heddle, I ended up with just about 8 feet of yarn left. That's it. And it's apparently decided to put itself in a knot, which is completely unimportant because I was going to snip this off anyway. The gradient is absolutely gorgeous, and I can't wait. The weft yarn is going to be a 5/2 pearl cotton from Silk City Fibers. I have a 1-pound cone. That should be plenty. It's not exactly the same color, but one of the things you'll learn the more you weave is that mixing color for weaving is a lot more like mixing paint than it is like mixing fabric in clothing or quilting. The colors just become part of each other at any kind of distance. Even though this looks a lot more blue to that one's green, I think they'll come out to be a very, very beautiful combination. And they'll tone down the black a little bit. So, quirks. This is cotton. Cotton doesn't stretch very well. And if you pull certain strands tight, it can get a little dicey because those have now been pulled and the other ones that haven't pulled are still tight because they haven't been yanked on. But the ones that are yanked on don't unyank. So they've now got hangy dangly bits. And this happens even when you're using the heddle, because all the threads that go through the holes have been stretched to be up or stretched to be down, but all the ones that are in the slots are just in a straight path. So as you weave, especially a long warp like this, you will frequently find that your slot threads get loose. One of the most common ways to fix this is to put your heddle in a down shed, throw a spare pickup stick or stick shuttle into that shed but behind the heddle, and then push it back like where you would store a pickup stick for your weave, but a little farther so it's actually on the roller. That will help eat up the length that needs to be equalized between the slot threads that have excess length and are now on top of the stick, and the hole threads that don't have excess length that are now below the stick. So they won't be taking the extra bump to go around the stick when it's in the back. But right now we need to wind on. Now this is my first time winding on this loom. There are some techniques and tricks that I have come across over the years. It is much nicer when you can keep even tension. Not always easy, especially not when you're winding on by yourself. But there's ways. My favorite is to wind on and let the loom creep towards the winding source. Now that's a little hard because I've got furniture and such underneath, but this table is on those sliding tennis balls so that furniture doesn't scrape the floor, but unlike the simple felt pads, it actually holds on to the foot of the of the table or chair. You sometimes see them on walkers. I got a specially cut purple tennis balls, because if you're getting them, why not get purple? So I have tennis balls on the feet of this, which means this table can be slid willy-nilly across my hardwood floors, and I don't need to worry about scratching the 1880s original flooring. Yay. So, quirks of this yarn, aside from it being cotton, is that because it's a 4-strand cotton, and right now I've effectively got 8 strands going through each of these slots, you've got to be careful that you pick the right 4 threads to be what you're moving over to the hole. So what I have done is I have taken bag clips, simple like snack bag clips. I got these from IKEA, though you can get them all over the place. Actually, that one's a Pampered Chef one. This one's an IKEA one. But they'll hold the layers separate from each other so that when I cut this, this will be one set of 4 threads and this will be the other set of 4 threads, so that by the time I've wound it on so that these are up here, I can just toss one of them over, and every set of yarn that's in that clip versus the one that was down that's going to separate the right 4 threads so they're from the strand they originally came in, which will help avoid tension issues and maintain your gradient perfectly. So let's get started. I'm going to move some of the stuff that was under my loom, under my table, back this way because I don't need to walk back and forth as much. A little bit, but not 100 times the way I did to wind this on. All right. Okay. Now, what's going to happen is as I wind, the loom is going to creep forward and the table is going to creep forward eventually. I will also probably end up moving this clamp to closer to the end of the table as one of the things that ends up moving. I have warp packing materials and some other stuff that I'm going to just take off of the table that I should have done before I started filming, but I didn't. We'll get the rest of that later. There is a clamp that I get to undo. All right. I do need to clip that thread. My 8 feet of excess yarn. All right. So we wind on. Very loud and clacky. Sorry about that. Nature of the game, though. Okay. So I am almost one rotation. I have a roll of paper. Of course it is. Kromsky Presto, Ashford Knitters, but actually the Wet Erica. They just both happen to be within a fraction of an inch of 20 inches wide. Okay. Okay, we're running into the trigger clamp, so I'm going to move that a bit. And we slowly keep winding on. And letting the loom travel as needed. Okay, so now I can move the clamp again. And it's a little hard to see, but there are some weaving books that are on the table here, which is helping provide some drag. I was going to take them out, but they're actually doing me a service where they are. It does keep trying to eat the roll. But as you can see, it's neat and tidy. Nothing's stacked on top of other threads. It's all a flat single layer. And we're about to be at the end of the table. Move the table. Now the tension isn't perfect, as you can see. It was wound on at a bit of an angle. But it's still better than if it was just hanging and flopping, or I was trying to juggle it with just myself. If I had a buddy, I might ask them to grab it with two hands and work it that way. But I don't have that right now. It is starting to creep a little bit, but I've got a solid inch this side and a good ½ inch on this side. Just for you to monitor it. It is starting to creep a little bit that way. Again, scooching the table. All right, it is now scooching enough that I've got a 1/4 inch, because the edge of my paper ends up being right here, even though the roll goes over here. So I'm going to cut it and start it again. Because there's still a fair bit of paper on this. I just want it to be properly even. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do is instead of taking it off the clamp, I'm probably going to just put this clamp over there. Let's see. And you can see the difference with the floppiness. See how it'll wind, because it's going to be winding a little bit while it's floppy, which I don't like, but I don't really have an in-between distance to work with. Having some tension again. Good. Well, I started this paper in the right place. I started it at an angle, but it's still working out. Okay. Alrighty. I was trying to get pre-cut paper that was 20 inches wide, and I ended up with something with newsprint on it, but we'll make it work. No, we won't. Not wide enough. Also not wide enough. Fun times. So I need to go figure out what I'm going to do for paper for this. I will stop the video here, but I'm going to basically wind until those clips are about to my heddle, and then I will flip one of them over the top, unclip them, and start doing the standard move one thread to the left. Well, in my case, it'll be to the right in the holes. I'm not decided yet if I'm going to toss back one of these two ends. When you thread a loom, if you pull loops, you have an even number of threads, which means one side is going to have a slot and the other side is going to have a hole. I've heard leave it like that. I've heard leave them both so that they're slot threads. And I've heard leave them both so that they're hole threads. I haven't woven enough consistently with the same materials to know which I prefer. I'll see. I don't love weaving when one of the threads is off of the loom. So If I just don't use that last thread and just toss it back over the back beam and it'll accumulate, I'll end up going from hole to hole all the way across my reed. We shall see. I hope this proved useful. I hope I'm in frame. And happy weaving adventures. Bye-bye.